Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the Atlantic Council for an excellent organization and discussion as we've had today and in previous days. I'm speaking first only because Ambassador Pasquale said to me that we're here in Europe, and therefore you should speak first. I'd just like to say to all my Turkish friends that I think that many of us in Brussels and elsewhere wish you were already in the political European Union. But in terms of energy, you are in Europe, and because the issues of energy unite everyone who is a neighbor to anyone else. Physical connections, the trade, the investments, inevitable. And there's no other sector where there's such an interplay between technology and public policy and public opinion, and markets. Essentially, technology enables, public policy and public opinion usually, hopefully, facilitates, but sometimes frustrates. And finally, markets decide. And we've got no better evidence for that from Fatih Birol's presentation this morning about technology enabling. We can see what's been happening on the gas market. We're getting a gas-to-gas competition, global competition, but also driven by technology. From the point of view of public opinion, you can see how Europe has been changed and transformed, perhaps Japan will see as well, by the post-Fukushima reaction among public opinion and the lack of acceptance of certain energy mixes. At the same time, you can see how markets react. In Europe, we are not necessarily blessed with reserves of unconventional gas, which everyone wants to exploit straight away. And some of our member states have moratoria on it. But what has been the impact of gas in the States on the energy mix in Europe? Frankly, coal is driving the price of electricity in Europe. It's not anything else than that. Coal is the most cost-effective form of electricity generation here in Europe. What is the result? As we all know, the US managed to reduce its CO2 emissions last year through substitution of coal and oil by gas. And what did the EU do last year? It actually increased its CO2 emissions. So there are a number of counterintuitive, contradictory results of the short term which make us think about whether we've got the strategy right for the long term. Let me add another thing, that of course in any market for commodities, and in any world situation in which governments need to cooperate, the uncertainty as to whether you're actually going to get cooperation or consensus is also a factor. So if in 2008 the European Union believed that there would be a consensus to reduce CO2 emissions throughout the world, the reality today is that we're faced with a much more, I would say, competitive environment. And that calls into question the basic balance between the three objectives which virtually every country and every region shares in the energy area. First of all, to provide competitive and affordable supplies to businesses and to consumers. Secondly, to ensure security of supply. And thirdly, to make sure that the sources of energy are sustainable. Now, if indeed in 2008 climate change and sustainability was at the top of the agenda, you can see from the graphs which we've looked at in the last few days and in the World Economic Energy Outlook as well of the IEA, that of course issues of competitiveness and security of supply have come up the agenda, and they've certainly come up the agenda in the European Union, and we will, as you will see next year, in the beginning of the year, update our strategy on 2008. And whereas you might say that in the past, in this period, for the European Union's member states, the objective was to deal with climate change and move to a low-carbon economy with the constraint of preserving competitiveness and security of supply. The order is slightly changed. I think we can say with some degree of reality now that we are making sure, we should make sure, that European consumers get affordable energy, that European business gets competitive supplies, that it is secure, those supplies are secure, but nevertheless we have to move towards a low-carbon economy in the longer term. Now, faced with the uncertainties which are evident in a world with so many different factors involved in the energy mix, I say the energy mix not just in terms of choice of technology, but the energy mix of different government views, public opinion. You know, in Austria and in Germany, in Europe, some people don't even know how to spell the word nuclear, but they certainly don't like it when they see it. In other areas of our society, people hate onshore wind like the devil. Others love it. Perhaps that diversity of Europe is maybe an advantage eventually in terms of security supply. But there are global trends which the European Union has to think about, and it has to base a policy of energy on some things which clearly will be sustainable, and some elements which are sustainable in the long term. And in the -3 minutes which our chair has allotted me, I will just refer to the things which the European Union and its member states will do with no regrets. The first thing is that we've been fighting for a number of decades to get in Europe, and I don't mean just political Europe, but the energy Europe, with Norway, with Algeria, with North Africa, with also indeed our big partners like Russia, even if they disagree, an open, competitive, integrated, interconnected market in Europe. This cannot be wrong under any circumstance for a Europe which is increasingly fossil fuel dependent. And we've made quite a lot of strides to get there. We've got 17 national markets in electricity coupled. You can't talk about a national market in electricity on the continent of Europe today. The volatility of exports and imports of national level is so great that it is impossible to deal with that on a national level. And therefore, we see the need to move very swiftly to the 2014 objective of making sure that market works. And it won't just work because of regulation and network codes. It has to also work through infrastructure connections. So we're building in the laws which are necessary to facilitate both private and public investment in networks. And just to reassure some of our colleagues here on whether this neoliberal so-called idea of an open market, and I don't believe in neoliberalism myself, I don't come from that tradition. I don't think any market works without a degree of regulation in it. There is nothing in European legislation against long-term contracts. There is something in long-term legislation about monopoly. There's something about rigidity in relation to market pressures. And if we look at the gas sector, I'm afraid to say we've got, gratefully and thankfully, a very large amount of liquidity in Europe in the gas market, thanks to global trends. And we want to keep it that way because it keeps a check on indexation. Because indexation in Europe may be dominated by oil. The Chinese are much more intelligent. They want indexation on coal. In a market like that, where there's pressures, this is healthy, and we want to keep it that way. The second thing of no regrets, we still are committed absolutely to diversifying supplies of our key raw materials and commodities from outside the European Union. And that means diversification of suppliers as well as routes. We're in favor of more than one supplier per country. We're in favor of different routes into the European Union. The route of the Southern Corridor being one which offers the potential for several countries, without naming them, who can actually deliver an alternative source of gas into this open, interconnected market in Europe. And that for us is absolutely capital. We have in the last 18 months, 2 years, tried to stand back from the precise concepts, technical concepts and designs of individual projects, and let the market decide which one it wants, whether it's east of Turkey, in Turkey, west of Turkey. Let the market decide which things which are commercially viable or not, and we will support them. And we will also facilitate other initiatives, including, indeed, South Stream, if that is required and wanted by commercial interests, in order to ensure that people who want to bring sources of energy into Europe, they can do it in a way which is not hindered by public policy and regulation. But our priority is diversification. Diversification of sources of energy, including renewables, by the way, and diversification of suppliers, because that is a healthy situation. The third thing I want to say, and Fatih Birol very eloquently underlined that this morning, is that in relation to the competitiveness situation of Europe, making better use of energy, whether in terms of energy intensity or in terms of straight more efficiency of products, of systems, of buildings, is an absolute key for Europe. And Europe is in the realm of the graph shown, where the investment in energy efficiency goes way beyond the immediate investment concern. Collectively, it means a huge avoidance of costs in generation and in imports. And then let's come on to the issue of climate change. It's very interesting, those countries, those economic units in the world who have not believed that it's necessary to sign up to climate change targets. The IEA, in its last energy outlook, emphasized the costs, the extraordinary costs of not taking into account the rise in temperatures. And of course, one can hope that individual countries and regions take that into account in their own national policies, even if they don't want any kind of global discipline. And that's totally understandable. But the European Union's position is it has, as a bloc, decided that even in a competitive environment, it is worth pursuing technologies which are low carbon. It has a limited capacity to do that in nuclear, because it has only 10 countries who are really committed to developing nuclear capacity. But it has the potential to develop renewables, and it has invested in it to roll out technologies to make sure that they can reach cost levels which are reasonable, and that for onshore wind and solar voltaic is already looking to be the case by 2015. So the position competitively in Europe looks problematic at the moment, but the European Union's long-term strategy is longer term than the situation today. Coal-fired capacity will be ultimately replaced by gas, as regulations enforce closure of polluting coal-fired capacities. The low price of carbon, as well as the low price of coal, is actually discouraging the use of carbon capture and storage as a potential for low-carbon economy. And we see, therefore, even more emphasis on the need for renewables. But it has to be done in a cost-effective way. It has to be done in a way in which we're not backing horses which are never going to win. So the game, the challenges for Europe are probably as acute as for any region in the world, but it has a strategy. It has to be realistic about it, but it's not going to give up. Thank you.